Live from the Cowboys Club at the Star in Frisco. Brought to you by Blockchain.com. Invest like your icons with Blockchain.com. The National Medal of Honor Museum. Join the mission at mohmuseum.org. Buffalo Wild Wings. If it's game day, Buffalo Wild Wings is the place to be. Alltech Lansing. Just listen with Alltech Lansing. Perfecting sound since 1927. And by SWBC Mortgage. Customized solutions to help you meet your personal and business goals. Visit SWBC.com. Now, your hosts, Nate Newton and Bobby Belt.
Wednesday, everyone. Welcome to Cowboys Crosstalk Live on the Dallas Cowboys Radio Network, DallasCowboys.com, and all other associated social media platforms. We are live from the Cowboys Club at the Star in Frisco. I'm Bobby Belt from 105 Through the Fan. Tonight I'm joined by my 105 Through the Fan teammate, Will Chambers. As always, we've got the three-time Super Bowl champ and six-time Pro Bowler, Nate Newton. Although, as I was corrected last week by Charles Haley, I'm supposed to call you Big Papa, I guess.
Only when he's around.
Okay, only when he's around.
Yeah.
You listen to everything Charles tells you to do, buddy.
Yeah, I got to throttle back. I got to pick and choose
And
which
I'm
one.
going to get you. When you finish introducing, I'm going to get you on something.
Oh, no. And our guest tonight is former Alabama Crimson Tide safety, a second-round pick of the Cowboys, a 5-year NFL veteran, Tony Dixon. Tony, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Tony.
Cowboys Crosstalk.
Thank you so much for joining us. All right, what did I say wrong, Nate? What were you going to get me for?
It was so funny. He had Charles on the string. He was working it. He was doing this thing. He was questioning us. Then he messed around and say, I was talking about your mom and dad. He called them by their first name.
I did. I said, okay. So I had interviewed Charles once before and said, your parents, George and Virginia Haley, and he didn't say anything about it.
Yeah.
So I had reference your parents, George and Virginia Haley, and he's like, that's Mr. and Mrs. Haley.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, all right.
That's Charles.
That's all it takes. All it takes is one.
I was about 90 seconds in.
Yeah.
And I said,
But it was great because he got him back on the hook. I mean, him and Charles really vibed. I like that. Him and Charles really vibed.
It was a great interview last week. After this one's done, you guys can go back and check out that one. Tony, I've made the reference there. Alabama Crimson Tide safety. Alabama, I got to at least push a little bit because obviously there was a big controversy with your alma mater this week. And it plays in locally here in Dallas with the SMU Mustangs getting in the playoff over the Alabama Crimson Tide. Is there anything you want to say to eulogize the Crimson Tide season or anything else?
But you know what? Here's what I would say. When we started the season out, people didn't think we was going to have a winning season. Mm-hmm. They said Debo, which is his name, they said he would not be that coach that would know how to coach in the SEC.
Right.
I mean, 3 losses. That's what you're talking about. We're talking about a team that has 3 losses and they think is a season that's went to you know what.
Yeah.
Right? So for me, I'm happy for the SMU Mustangs. Congratulations to them. And honestly, our fans need a break.
You guys need a breather from all the success.
No. He's
saying
all the money
arrogance
for traveling to all these national championship playoff games.
The weight of college football has been on our shoulders for so long, man.
Bobby loves this. Bobby could not agree with you more.
Oh my God!
No, absolutely.
The weight of college football.
Oh man!
I like that.
Not a lie
like
was
that.
told. I have to say.
What do you think about that, Kentucky? I mean,
hey, look. What did I say? It's not just about playing Alabama and Georgia and LSU.
Right.
It's about playing South Carolina, Kentucky, going into Starkville, and this year Vandy, who used to be the Purdue, and now they're what are they 6-6?
Yeah.
Right.
Wow.
You know what? Can I just let me speak from the perspective of the outside view of Bama?
Come on.
All right,
But now freshly in the SEC for the first year.
Right. And just hating it because I hate being part of what I've criticized for so long. But here's the thing. That when you look at take for instance Belichick and the Patriots for years, okay?
Right.
If you would talk to people around the league over the last decade or so, you would find what some people might say were sour grapes or some jealousy from just various people around the league where whenever they just kind of mumble under their breath, the Patriot way, and just do one of those, and they'd say that the Patriot way is you got Tom Brady. Congratulations. You got the greatest quarterback of all time. And I think there's a little bit of that existed over the Saban years where it's like, okay, yeah, all right, Bama, you guys are Bama, you got Saban, and
Right.
whatever.
Wow.
I also remember Dennis Franchione. Okay, there's a little bit of that, but
we're doing it with Kansas City right now, by the way.
When you look at that and see that aspect of it, do you think that, given how Nick Saban was like, man, I'm tired, I got to walk away from this, are you ever able to replicate the Saban type of atmosphere with Bill Belichick taking the North Carolina job? Are you ever able to replicate that atmosphere, do you think, in the NIL era? Or do you need the softer Kalen DeBoer approach where Jalen Milroe talked about, I'm allowed to celebrate or be happy about a play I made at practice? I was never able to do that before.
Yeah, I think you got to find a happy balance. I mean, we know this is a different generation, right? But here's my deal. You're probably not going to see that again. And here's why. Because Saban always talked about process. And to have a process, that means your veterans are your coach. And right now, who are you going to lean on?
Yeah.
I mean, we had the lowest population of seniors this year than we've had in a while. The other thing I would tell you is you have to question, am I here for tradition or am I here for money? And I would tell you, Alabama was successful before because people came there for that tradition, for that scenario.
Process,
but now you have people coming out of this year already in transfer portal. Why would you do that when you're at Alabama?
You know, there's another element, too, that about right after the Vandy loss, where I thought it was interesting that one of the leaders, one of the older guys on the team had said, you know, we need to button this up. Like, we need to we need to tuck in our shirts. We need to start being on time, and on time means a little bit early for meetings and things like that. And it just goes to show you that as much talent and as good a year that you were just saying, which is true that Alabama had, how small the margins are, that this is the reason why Nick Saban's and the Steve Sarkisians and the Kirby Smarts of the world are so maniacal, because it's those little things during the week that all of a sudden you lose to Vandy. You go to Norman and you score 3 points, and those are the difference between playing in the college football playoff and not.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is we should have lost to Georgia. You go back and look at the stats.
Yeah.
We were 28-0 in the second quarter. Georgia had the lead 2 minutes left in the fourth quarter. Had it not been for one of our
you play another
stars,
quarter, you do.
Had we not had that 5-star cornerback that reached and made a phenomenal play, we would have lost that game.
I agree.
So now, what is your school, Bobby?
Texas.
Texas.
My school is the workforce, Nate.
But
the
12th man, right?
I grew up a Texas.
No.
I grew up a Texas fan though.
Right.
So I did not go to Texas. I'm one of the T-shirt Texans.
Right.
Okay.
Man.
But so Texas actually came from when we first moved back to Dallas. We had lived in Nashville.
Yes, sir.
When I first moved back to Dallas and started watching college football, that was Ricky Williams' breakout year.
Right.
And so it was like all right, this is home and that's Ricky Williams. So that's what I'm picking.
And the thing about it, man, we just had one of the nicest round tables of the SEC. I like that because even though I went to Florida A&M, I've always been an SEC
He
guy.
has.
Yeah.
Going back to our ESPN days,
yes.
we would talk so much college football.
SEC, baby.
Yeah.
And then one thing, I went to a game Texas played, was it Bama? In the Rose Bowl. I was at that game.
yeah.
It would have been USC or Michigan.
Yeah. But anyway, it was in Pasadena. And that's the first time I felt the vibes, SEC.
Yeah.
But I I'm not the only one digging the SEC. You know what I'm saying?
Nate, I went to a school in the SEC.
Right.
Okay, I went early November to Baton Rouge to Death Valley for Alabama LSU, and my first thoughts as I got to our seat and I'm looking up and I'm like, I thought to myself, you think you play in the SEC?
Man.
Yes.
Man.
This is
It's nice.
the SEC.
100,000. How many stadiums do they seat over 100,000?
Yeah.
I mean, the atmosphere, the students, the fans, and by the way, the difference in this year is we used to know that if we could take out the team and take their best punch in the first half, we could beat them in the second half.
Right.
Well, the reality now is the scale has evened.
Yes.
You know,
It certainly has.
We talked about this a couple weeks ago. We had Morris Claiborne on, and Morris was a guy who played at LSU, so he's an SEC guy. And I'm curious if this was the same for you. You get drafted by Dallas in the second round in 2001. And when you got here, do you feel like that big program preparation, like at Alabama or LSU or places like that, which the Cowboys I think historically have been tied to, is they like to draft guys from big programs that feel like they're a little more ready for the moment of Dallas. Did you feel that intensity of I'm glad I was at a school that was as prominent as the one I was, because that gave me a chance to be prepared walking in here.
Oh, absolutely. My roommate was Lynn Scott that year. So
Right.
if you talk about Lynn Scott, I think it's Northwestern Oklahoma, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Forgive me, Lynn, if I'm wrong. But even talking to him and people like Pete Hunter later on that came from Virginia Union,
Right.
it's a total difference. And I think it does prepare you in a way that maybe some of the schools wasn't prepared for, because you expect certain things. So now all of a sudden it's not a shock value to you.
I'm telling you, I went to the Washington team coming out of Florida A&M. The preseason games was blowing me away.
Man.
You know, when they released me, I didn't have no animosity against them. I'm like, wow, that was pressure I had never felt before.
Yeah.
To be released was
Right.
a
Hey.
relief of pressure. But
Man.
I'm going to tell you, man, wow, Bobby. Introduce Tony again, man.
This is Tony Dixon. This is Tony Dixon. See, hey, shout out to you, Scott Purcell. Nate is making sure I reset like you wanted. We got
Future producer Nate Newton.
Exactly.
Go ahead, Nate.
We got Tony Dixon, the former Alabama Crimson Tide safety, former
Tupac
second-round
lookalike.
pick. There you go. All right, Tupac lookalike too. All right, there you go. We got that as well. All right, you know what? Let's go ahead and just reset. We're gonna throw it to break. We're gonna get to our first break and then catch our breath, because we're already going a million miles a minute. I want to talk to you about a number of different things from earlier in your career, Tony, because you had, like I say, you go from big program, Alabama. You're picked in 2001. Second week of the NFL season gets delayed, canceled. That's right in the middle of 9/11. You had the transition to Bill Parcells, all the different things that occurred during your career. We're going to talk to Tony Dixon about it when we come back here on the SWBC Cowboys Crosstalk.
Go Cowboys!
Back to SWBC Mortgage's Dallas Cowboys Crosstalk.
Yeah, check this out.
Broadcasting live from the Cowboys Club at the Star in Frisco.
At SWBC, customized solutions for individuals and businesses are just a click away. Visit SWBC.com to learn more and start your next adventure. We are live from the Cowboys Club at the Star in Frisco for the SWBC Cowboys Crosstalk. I'm Bobby Belt from 105 Through the Fan. I've got my 105 Through the Fan teammate Will Chambers with me tonight. I've also, as always, got the 3-time Super Bowl champ, 6-time Pro Bowler, Nate Newton. And our guest this evening is the former Dallas Cowboys safety, Tony Dixon. Tony, thank you again for hanging around with us.
Thank you all for having me.
So
Thank you, Tony.
I'm curious just for the shock to your system of come out of Alabama, get to Dallas. Obviously, you know, the pinnacle in terms of attention and everything else that exists in the NFL with Dallas. A transitionary period for sure, though,
Yes.
where there had been some struggles and, you know, it was post-Aikman era, post-Michael Irvin, post-Nate Newton, post a lot of different people. And then when you get there and you're coming into such a tumultuous era, there, of course, was the same year that the tragedy of September 11th happened, right before, it was right after week 1, I think, leading into week 2. Just do you have any recollection of just how much more complicated that made things within NFL locker rooms? I mean, we all talk about it in the context of our own lives and our jobs and everything else. How different or how bizarre was that whole time period?
Yeah, you know, the amazing thing is I remember when they first came out, because we were just going out for walkthrough. And they came out, and I remember seeing the reporters and everybody looking at, you know, just stunned and looking at each other. And then they finally came in and told us what was going on. And that was just something you couldn't grasp. So we all ran into the training room, and by the time we ran in there, that's when the second plane hit. So that's how we saw it. I think the biggest thing, though, that first trip to New York a couple weeks later, and at that point you still saw like the smoldering smoke, right? And that's when it really makes sense, like, oh my God, like you saw it on TV, but to see it in real life, that reality, it was one of those that I think the amazing thing, we came together, unified as one on the team, but in that moment, man, you just can't prepare for that.
Did having football help?
I think it did. I think because you had the community. You had the community of brothers in the locker room. You had people that was from the area, and so they could come and talk about emotionally what it meant to them. But then more than anything, when you start hearing about your friends, family, and other supporters that knew somebody, that's when it made it real.
You know, Mike McCarthy talks a lot about he gets here in 2020, COVID hits, and everything was obviously radically different. You guys didn't have the same limitations, but obviously a complete cancellation of games. I think it pushed Detroit back to the end of the year for you guys. Yep. Did you feel a little bit like McCarthy does, where he says, you know, 2020, like, it doesn't even feel like my first year in Dallas. 21 does. Did you at all feel like, have that feeling yourself where it was like, 02 was kind of like, all right, here's a normal year for me to actually just feel like this is kind of my rookie year? You
know, when I would tell you, I think the organization did a good job isolating that from us. Like, they try to keep everything as structured and normal as possible, but also the heightened security is what we paid attention to, because everything that we got, that Nate and them got used to, we didn't have those luxuries because everything was locked down, like even down to searching every single compartment of your bags, and that was something we really didn't experience beforehand. So I give it up to the Jerry Jones and entire organization for doing what they could to make it as normal as we could, but also understanding the magnitude of what the situation was and making sure we was true ambassadors for not only the team but for how America was feeling at the time.
I want to ask real quick when it comes to that. I know when we're talking about the transition, because you know programs can have their heights, they can have their lows and all that, but there are certain programs that have fan bases that never change, no matter what. And the Cowboys have not been to a Super Bowl, have not been to an NFC Championship in a very long time.
What's your question?
The fan base has never. It's
Show
never
me the baby,
changed.
Will. Show me the baby.
It's never changed. What was that like? Does it feel the same way, like in dealing with the pressure of playing for the Cowboys because of how big the fan base is?
Man, relentless. And some of the biggest pressure come from your family. Right? But no, it was nonstop, because at the end of the day, we know that we are truly America's team. So good, bad, and different, you're going to be on TV, right? So do you want it in a good way or do you want it in a bad way?
Right.
Now, fortunately, you know, we don't pick sides, but defensively, we was in the top 10 every year. So from that, we could hang our hat.
Wow.
Right? We did. We were. And then, you know, the big question then was
Who was
stability.
your coach, defensive coach?
Zimmer.
It was. Yeah.
Mike Zimmer. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So we had a phenomenal team. You know, my first year was George Teague and Darren Woodson at safeties, right? So that's who I learned from. And to your point, from that standpoint, the fan base, tried and true, but
it was easier. I mean, you could handle it. I've been here before.
It's just
you've been to Tuscaloosa.
It's just like Alabama and everybody else against us.
Yeah.
But but Will,
you tried to Haley me.
No,
you tried to Haley me.
No, I didn't. And I want to apologize. But why, he's a Cowboy fan. I'm a Cowboy fan. Truth to that, why every time somebody asks a question of the Cowboys, we got to be referenced? We ain't been to the Super Bowl. We ain't.
Yeah,
why is it just? It's been a while. Why you just?
I'll tell you why.
Okay.
Because I grew up not being a fan of, a huge fan of the Bengals.
Right.
But those lean years in the 90s, like with David Klingler and whomever, there wasn't much interest in the Bengals.
Right.
That became a Cincinnati Reds town. It's always a Reds town. That's back to a Reds town.
Right.
I don't care what anybody says here about anything about the Rangers. God love them, and the Stars and the Mavs. And when they win, this is a Cowboys town.
And
it's really a Cowboys country, despite whatever happens. That does not happen with every other team. That's why I bring it up.
Okay, thank you.
It does not. That's why internationally is a sellout.
Yeah. It is interesting, though, because there were lean years, just compared to other sports. There were lean years for the Boston Celtics where people kind of checked out. There were lean years for the New York Yankees where there were checkouts. There were lean years for the Lakers, whatever sport you want to talk about. Even in leaner years for the Cowboys, it is interesting how there's a difference between, I think, an expectation and a standard. So whenever there's people talking about Super Bowl every year, and people are like, that team, you can't expect them to win a Super Bowl right now, or, they got to do this or that. It's like, okay, but there's a difference. Nobody's saying necessarily this is the expectation, but this is the standard, and if you're falling short, you're still not meeting the standard. But I don't think it is. I think here in Dallas, nationally, that's the standard for everybody. Nationally, the narrative around them will always be, you will not be given our approval unless you do that, because that's the standard you set for us for so many years. Where I don't think that exists for the Yankees.
Okay, in that context, I would agree. In that context, yes. I think the reality of the standard, just because of what you said. The Yankees were awful in the 80s, for most of the 80s, well into the 90s. You mentioned the Lakers, post-Magic, through Nick Van Exel and all that. All these great franchises and programs go through that. I agree with you in the standpoint it needs to be here, but I think that the reality is that all franchises go through lean decades. It happens.
Sure, absolutely. And that's all I just I'm curious for you guys about. When you talk about standard, did you, for instance, Nate, when you got here in the 80s, or Tony, when you got here and things were lean when you got here, or not quite lean when you got here?
It was lean, yes, it
was. As went on.
It was lean.
Did you guys still feel that standard existing within the building?
Here's a challenge. And this is the reality everybody faces. When you get to a point where the youngest player on your team doesn't remember the time that you were in the Super Bowl, that's where it's challenging. Because at that point, it has to be a Nate. It has to be one of those, prime. It has to be Urban. It has to be somebody old school, Emmett, Troy, coming in the locker room and talking about what that standard looks like. Nobody have seen it. They have not seen it, so they have to recreate the new standard.
Yes.
Because you can't lean on the old standard. It's now, what's the new standard?
Yes. How do you get there, Nate? Because for whatever reason, and we've witnessed this with the Cowboys the last few years, they're up in Chicago. They are all about the 85 Bears. That's all they talk about, despite the fact they've been to some NFC title games. They've been to a Super Bowl. So they get up and down. They're able to get there. They haven't won and all that. How do the Cowboys, who just cannot seem to, as good as they can be, get to those next levels in the playoffs?
To be honest with you, we talked about it with Nick Saban leaving. We talked about it with Bill Belichick leaving. With Jimmy was a part of this through Coach Parcells. He talked to Parcells about a whole lot of things. How do I win in this league? And, fellas, whether you want to believe it or not with this new generation, it's called discipline. Mm-hmm. It's called nonstop. The closest place right now to what I see is Detroit. 49ers had it, but injuries has decimated them. When everything you do is predicated to going to a Super Bowl, your practices are dedicated to going to a Super Bowl. The way you walk and way you handle yourself on and off the field is predicated to going to a Super Bowl. It's a nonstop discipline. And when you don't have that discipline, like you said, because we so far removed from a Super Bowl to the only way you get there is how you work, the time you're willing to put in, and the players that you have drafted understands that. And so until we get that as a Cowboy players, they don't have that right now. This team is young. Even a couple of years before, what we thought, I knew, because your world don't revolve around that. You have to revolve around that, and you know, it's my team, and I love them, but it don't revolve right now around Super Bowl.
We're here on the SWBC Cowboys Crosstalk. We got Tony Dixon joining us. Tony, you know, we've asked a couple different people this. Nate's talking about, you were just talking about passing on legacy or standard or whatever else. You had also just referenced there that you were practicing behind Darren Woodson when you first got here. And we've talked to a lot of people in recent weeks about, hey, Darren's up for the Hall of Fame again, and people have given testimony. We haven't talked to anybody yet who was essentially practicing right behind him, understudy, learning him. Just talk about, for those that don't know, if there's somebody sitting at home right now listening to this on 105 The Fan or DallasCowboys.com or the Cowboys Radio Network, wherever, and they're saying, I didn't see Darren Woodson play very much. Pass on your story to them of what kind of a player Darren Woodson
was. It is an absolute travesty that Darren Woodson is not in the Hall of Fame. He changed the game for safeties.
Yeah.
This man, during that era, the best receiver was in the slot. They did not have to go to a nickel or dime package to do that. Darren Woodson dropped down in the slot and covered him. So when I look at that, I feel like obviously everything that Emmett was going through in terms of the height, this is the other part. The day Emmett broke the record, Darren Woodson broke the tackling record. Yep. And we didn't stop the game to recognize Darren Woodson for that. So my thing is, with part of it too is we know Darren is one of the most humble men you'll ever meet. But there's a fine line between humility and not getting your worth. And I think because of his humility, Darren really hadn't got his true value, his true worth. And not enough people are standing up and talking about what he meant to that safety position. Because I will tell you, a lot of the people that's been in the Hall of Fame the last couple of years, they got there because they watched Darren Woodson.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about it before. Brian Broaddus, who works with us at the Fan, he was in Green Bay in the 90s. He was with Leroy Butler, and he's like, I love Leroy Butler. Leroy Butler helped get me a Super Bowl ring. Leroy Butler should not be in the Hall of Fame before Darren Woodson. There's just no way. You can't justify. And that's somebody who won a Super Bowl with him. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to take our second break here. We're talking with Tony Dixon, former Cowboys safety, former Alabama Crimson Tide, proud Alabama Crimson Tide SEC evangelist. Tony Dixon joining us here.
There you go.
When we come back, I want to talk about the transition that you guys went through when Parcells arrived. And not just when Parcells arrived, but when the very loud rumors started in the middle of the season about Bill Parcells arriving. So we're going to get Tony Dixon's thoughts on that. We also got Nate Newton and Will Chambers with us. I'm Bobby Belt. This is the SWBC Cowboys Crosstalk.
Go Cowboys!
a lot of times, I tell people I want more from Michael Parsons than Parsons wants. I think Parsons is a game changer in the run game, in the pass game.
I agree with
in
you.
The run, I believe this.
Yeah.
Now, do he believe it? I know Zim is trying to get it from him because I know Zim. He's trying if he'll let him.
I think he believes it, but does he believe it, right?
Yeah, that's the thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, some people grab their kids and shove them in the corner. Some people grab their kids and take them to the corner.
Yeah.
It's a difference.
Yeah.
It's a difference,
you're right.
man. Yeah.
Absolutely right.
One can get you in trouble, and the other just grows your kid a better kid. Yeah.
There you go. That is Nate Newton's voice right there. We got Will Chambers on Bob Belt. We're joined tonight by Tony Dixon, former Cowboys safety, here on the SWBC Cowboys Crosstalk. I'm curious, you both taking it back a little bit, and we're going to dive into some stuff from the Cincinnati game and some stuff moving forward for the Cowboys. But last topic here that I want to kind of touch on just from y'all's experiences. You played for Jimmy, but specifically I'm thinking Landry.
Right,
you played for Tom Landry. You then had those couple years here with Bill Parcells. Knowing who they were at that stage of their careers, could you have envisioned them going down to the college level to run a program the same way that we got in the news today that Bill Belichick's doing with North Carolina?
That's the best question I've heard in 2 months of anything media. I honestly.
Could you have envisioned that? And do you think they would have figured a way out to have the success because football's football?
Part of me wants to believe, because Bill Parcells focused on the statistics of the game. So he taught you, what the frequencies were, like tendencies were, and you learned that. Now,
analytics?
So very, very much so. So in college, you didn't talk that. We had analytics on the referees. So a part of me wants to believe that if you go down, you have that hungry young teenager, that they're going to buy into that program. The other side of me want to believe that Bill Parcells and that aura may be too much for that young individual to deal with. So I'm kind of on the fence on that. What's your thoughts?
I believe the same. But Coach Landry, man, he would have found a way. Like I think Coach Parcells, I think Coach Belichick, they're gonna find a way. They're going to find a way, man, because they want success. They want success for themselves as well as for these players. I believe they'll find a way. I believe Coach Landry would have found a way, and I believe Coach Parcells would have. And this analytics thing, I love the guys that are sitting back behind the scenes making all that money with analytics, but the great coach has been doing that forever.
Yeah.
Have the lines been blurred so much between college and pros, do you think, in terms of just very – public money has been introduced to the college level with essentially contracts that exist.
Right.
Matt Rule at Nebraska talking about how much it costs basically to go acquire a quarterback in the portal. Right. It sounds like free agency at times. You've got, blending of offensive concepts between NFL and college and different things like that. And it's the stuff that Saban talked about where he was like, I have to walk away. Do you think the lines have just been blurred so much that somebody like Belichick or other NFL coaches may just say, all right, well, this is familiar enough to what I'm already doing at the NFL level. It's not the same challenge it would have been 20 years ago.
I mean, you bring Belichick up, and what made him so great? As a person sitting out watching the teams and talking to some of the players on his team, remember what those players did. They took pay cuts. Mm-hmm. They took pay cuts because to your point, they had a bigger vision.
Yes.
And because of that, they locked into it. The challenge is if you don't have that vision as a team, if I want all this money, but I'm not going to do everything I can to support Nate, that's a problem. And so I think Bill Belichick, because of that mentality, will be great.
I do too. You got to understand, every school don't have the same budget as Bama, Southern Cal, Michigan, Ohio State. Deion told me that straight up. He said, we don't have that budget. Yeah. So we still have to go out and find kids that fit into our program and into our system. I still have to coach these kids. It's still going to come down to, are you as a parent and a kid, a young man, willing to sacrifice a little bit? And if you're not willing to sacrifice, you going to Bama, sitting on the bench, you may make $500,000 this year because they wanted you. But if you can't crack their lineup, they taking next year you won't see the $500,000.
You're not on the payroll.
Yeah, and you're going to be begging somebody. Mm-hmm. So it's still going to come down to, do you have any fire in your gut to play this game? It's still going to come down to that.
But are people focused on development right now, though?
No. And that is what the college coaches are facing, and that's why we see so many bad offensive linemen.
Yeah.
This league, I'm begging parents, if your kid is 6'3", 285 pounds, get him on the ropes, get him because he can make a boatload of money in the NFL and in college.
Who are the first-round draft picks? We know the best first-round draft picks are the ones that every team is looking for.
Yes.
Are looking for offensive tackles and edge rushers.
Yes.
That should be the focus. I mean, I agree to a point of what you're saying there. I mean, I think it's also because so many of the college offenses are all from the spread, so not many of them are big enough they're more speed guys, and that makes it difficult to transition.
I just believe this right here. It still comes down. What separates Detroit besides all the bad years of losing?
Oh, it's offensive line.
And getting a good team. Now you brought a coach in there, and the owner really let him decide his players with the GM, and he got the type of guys he want now. The Cowboys, and I don't know how Mr. Jones them do it in the war room, but you really have to make a concerted effort to get the guys with the right attitudes. You got to go ask the equipment guy at Nebraska, hey man, does he love the game? Do y'all have to beg him to work out? Do y'all have? How many times have you been late to practice? This stuff is going to be big.
Is he hungry?
Yeah, everybody's getting paid, bro.
Let's go ahead. Let's take our final break of the evening. This is the SWBC Cowboys Crosstalk. We got Will Chambers here. Nate Newton, our guest tonight, is Tony Dixon. I'm Bobby Bell. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about this game that occurred over on Monday between the Cowboys and the Bengals. Tough loss for Dallas. And also, one more question I want you guys to think of while we're here in break, as we were just talking about different coaches, things like that. And you mentioned Deion Sanders, who has gone on to become a successful coach at Colorado. I'm curious if there was a guy that you guys played with on the Cowboys that you always thought he's going to be a coach one day, that didn't for whatever reason, but you always thought, man, I'm surprised he didn't go down that path. So we're going to get those thoughts when we come back here on the SWBC Cowboys Crosstalk.
Go Cowboys!
only.
Back to SWBC Mortgage's Dallas Cowboys Crosstalk.
Yeah, check this out.
Broadcasting live from the Cowboys Club at the Star in Frisco.
At SWBC, customized solutions for individuals and businesses are just a click away. Visit SWBC.com to learn more and start your next adventure. We're live from the Cowboys Club at the Star in Frisco for the SWBC Cowboys Crosstalk. I'm Bobby Belt from 105 through the Fan, joined by my teammate from the Fan, Will Chambers. We've got the 6-time Pro Bowler, 3-time Super Bowl champion, Nate Newton, with us. And our guest tonight is, as we've turned the SEC evangelist, and the former second-round pick of the Cowboys,
There we go.
former Cowboys safety, Tony Dixon, joining us. I asked you guys before we went to break, Nate and Tony, if there was a guy during your time playing with the Cowboys that you were like, man, I was certain if he wanted to, he didn't do it, but if he wanted to, he would have been just a fantastic coach.
You know, my guys know. With my guys, the only one I could see doing it, and I knew he wasn't going to do it, that was Troy Aikman. Yeah, anybody else, I just didn't see it. When Prime, when he started with the truth in South Dallas, I just used to look at him and start laughing like, man, what are you doing?
We've all seen the clip where Troy was angry to have to do it as a player.
Yeah, so I'm like, that was but I know he had passion. I know you have to have passion to direct, and that's grown men or children. Because if you don't have a passion, you'll get out of this thing so quick. You know, you got to have a passion. That's what I told people, like, you want to coach? What? Y'all want to deal with 53 of me? No.
Tony,
so many hours.
Tony, how about for you?
You know, I hate to be like, I don't have anything extra, because I would tell you, everybody I thought were going to coach are coaching.
Yes.
I mean, from Aaron Glenn to Dan Campbell
to
all the others, to even Jason Witten. You know, we already know he's coming up. So those individuals I already knew was going to coach. Keith Davis is a coach. Mario Edwards is a coach. It's so many that are out there coaching right now, and I knew that was going to happen.
Boy, you say whenever you say Mario Edwards, by the way, that's what makes me as relatively young. That's what makes me feel old, is Mario Edwards' son almost being at retirement age at this point. It's throwing me off a little bit. Yeah. All right, guys. So
better get used to that.
let's talk about the Bengals game back on Monday.
That's funny.
I thought there was so much to like about the game from a defensive perspective. Rico Dowdle was fantastic, and the run blocking is really kind of becoming cohesive. Even when Cooper Beebe went out and they had to shift Brock Hoffman inside, Nate, it feels like things are moving towards the direction that you've been clamoring for several weeks, which is, let's get a running game established. Let's play physical football. Let's, settle this defense down. Zimmer's figuring out some different ways to do some things. How much do you think the Brock Hoffman coming into the lineup and just playing with that violence and edge that he does, how much do you think that's helped lift the run game?
It's just a good thing. When you start, like I say, I told people sometimes a less talented guy, as long as he's above average, and he's not your key player, he can make a difference. And Brock has made a difference. T.J. Bass, Odoga, who I dogged out. Y'all know how bad I dogged him now. He's come in and been consistent. I dogged him out, man. Apologies. So they're being consistent. The teams that we're playing has not been great, so it's giving them a chance to build momentum and get hyped. And fans, remember this. We don't be joking when we say it's one or two plays that can change your game.
Right.
Remember that. Don't ever forget that.
In a season.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Tony, when you look at, Mike Zimmer, the reconnect here, coming back after 05, I think was his last year here, and being gone for almost 20 years, coming back, and there was a lot of discussion about, is Zimmer going to be too prickly of a personality for this new age NFL player? And all we're hearing is a lot of consistent feedback and praise from players of like, no, I love Zim. I mean, I think people anticipated maybe there'd be some Micah and Mike Zimmer friction. They seem to get along really well. Micah has nothing but great things to say about him. And his defense finally seems to kind of be settling into place. Is that something that when you watch games this year, you were like, they're going to turn it around? Regardless of the personnel, Zim's going to figure out a way to mix and match this and make something work.
Yeah, one thing I told people about Mike Zimmer is that one thing I can say is every game we went into, we were prepared. Every single game we went into, we were prepared, and we were playing for something. We were playing for each other. We knew that we had to change the concept of the game. Go get the turnover. Stop, control third downs. Get off the field. We knew those things, and that's what Zimmer preaches every day. So, yes, initially in the season, I was like, oh, boy, are they taking to him? And then I finally started seeing the turnaround, right? And honestly, I think the Micah Parsons injury helped the defense more than anything.
Really?
Because I think it created depth, and I think as a young player, you always going to lean on the person you know going to make the play. Yeah. When he's not there, guess what? Now you're looking around like, who's going to step up?
No, and that's a really good point there. I think it's something where you saw different guys step up.
You couldn't ask anything more of the defense from Monday night.
No,
I don't think, right?
And I think what you're seeing is a defense that what you saw the first half of the season was Mike Zimmer going, who are my players? Let me figure out what their strengths and weaknesses are. There's a little bit of mixing and matching. Okay, I can't do this with this guy. I can do this here. Figuring out, okay, this guy, I want somebody who's maybe moved. Carl Lawson getting inserted into the lineup more. Carlos Watkins being acquired, getting put in there more. Mozzie Smith starting to come around, play a little bit. One of the guys who had really been a consistent player for them, and it clearly rattled a lot of the team on Monday night, was DeMarvion Overshown, and he goes down with that devastating injury. And he's somebody who just, from top to bottom, everybody in the organization just has great things to say about DeMarvion Overshown. Eric Kendricks was in the locker after, and he got really emotional, and he had talked about, even as a veteran, he's like, there's something just refreshing and gives you some juice when you see a kid like DeMarvion Overshown come in and just love this and smile on his face and just happy to be in the NFL and happy to be part of this team. How significant of because people I think a lot of times just for fans, they see injury off the field, all right, we're back to the game, and those guys don't move on like that, especially when it's somebody that important. How big of a factor can that be, and how it can weigh on a team when you have a player go down with a devastating injury like that?
Well, I think you have to add to it when you're not meeting the expectations that you set beginning of the year. So I think you have to put those together, because if the Cowboys were at the expectations they had beginning of the season, I don't think it would be as traumatic, right? But because they're not there now, that's another leader that we're seeing carted off or walking off or going through trauma. Right. So I think for that standpoint, because of it's not where we want it to be, that's where the challenge is this year.
Man, I just all I can do is just pray for him, man, because I've seen guys make it back, but what he's going to go through is going to be if he come back by the end of next year, it's still too soon. He should take a year off. I'm not
No, Mike McCarthy said. McCarthy himself said it may not be until 2026. He doesn't know yet. I mean, this is you tear 3 ligaments.
He tore up everything. Bro.
It's a very different injury, but I mean, we've seen this injury.
And the way he plays. Yeah. I mean, that's what he is. I mean, it's the energy and speed, and in order to have that, that type of injury to your knee, that, as Nate said, you pray for him, and then you hope that there's enough time for it to come back to be to get him back to something like that, especially because that is what he is.
Yes. All gas and no brakes.
We can take a look at, two different things recently. Guys were emotional in the locker room, too, when the Zach Martin injury news was he's getting surgery and that the season's over. I'm curious that when we talk about culture and trying to build the culture here and do different things, when you see Zach Martin go out and Brock Hoffman comes in and does answer the call, like you said, when it's easy to lean on somebody, but Brock Hoffman answers the call, Terrence Steele, Cooper Beebe, they answer the call. When DeMarvion Overshown goes out and Maris Leofau has to come in as a rookie and immediately gets 2 sacks in the final quarter and is able to focus and lock in and elevate his play, are those signs for both of you guys here, Nate and Tony, I'm curious, are those signs to you guys that, hey, those are the clues of maybe culture's improving among the players and you're starting to get a little bit of that growth that you want?
I think it goes back to what we were saying earlier with Mike Zimmer. It takes a while to plant those seeds and for those seeds to start developing. And I think right now people are buying into it and they're believing like, okay, yeah, it's a difference, right? Because we came from Dan Quinn and success and things of that nature. And he came in, people were like, I don't know. But I think now they've warmed up to him and they see, and the proof is in the pudding at this point, as they say.
One thing that Zim has that all great coaches has, they can look in your eye and say, do your job. If you do your job and he do his job and I do my job, we fit this thing together, we hard to beat. And that's what everybody's doing now. Everybody's doing their job, man. Defensively, you see it. You saw it starting 4 games ago. Everybody's getting better at their job.
Is that you mentioned it there. Charles mentioned last week, he used the phrase, he's like 11 moving as one.
Yes.
And the challenges of that. Is that the biggest challenge that you guys think exists in NFL culture, is just getting 53 guys to the cohesion issue just in general, outside of obviously injuries and other factors? Is that the biggest, I guess, social goal or psychological goal that exists for a team? I
mean, you're not a team until you can do it.
Yes.
Period. Right? Because if not, you're a bunch of chiefs running around. Everybody has selfish interests. Like, when you can break it down and actually create that cohesion of a team, it's a game changer.
When you can go 6 times, on fourth down, you got to have 53 guys moving together.
Yeah.
All right? Now, the rest of the world can tell you how stupid he is, how crazy he is, and I hope he don't do it in the playoffs, but he got 53 guys moving in the right direction.
And they are going to be moving in the direction of Charlotte, North Carolina this weekend for a Panthers team that's playing a lot better lately. Bryce Young really starting to put it together.
Thank God, I'm so happy for the kid.
He just, it took a little bit because he came from the SEC. So I think that was his problem. No, he's been fantastic. It's been great to see the last couple weeks. Nate, I guess in the last couple seconds, we don't need to guess where your allegiances are this week. You root for Dallas.
Cowboys for life.
Yeah, there we go. That's what we thought. Tony Dixon, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you,
it's been
Tony.
absolutely fantastic. For Tony Dixon, Nate Newton, Will Chambers, I'm Bobby Belt. This has been the SWBC Cowboys Crosstalk. We'll talk to you guys again next week.
Evangelist.
This has been a production of DallasCowboys.com and the Dallas Cowboys Football Club.
How about this, Cowboys?